All right, we'll go back on the record in People versus Limon, BF 1668018. Record reflects she's present in court, Mr. Terry. People are represented by Mr. Smith, and we do have all 12 plus 4 in the box. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I see you all back. We're going to do something a little different this morning. Mr. Smith has a witness here that's available only for a small window, okay? So we're going to go ahead and take that witness up now out of order. We will continue with Mr. Hearn after that witness. You follow me? So we're going to put Hearn on the back burner for a second, take this witness up, then we'll bring him back in. Okay, Mr. Smith.
People call Corey Hamilton.
Thank you. Sir, could you step up to the podium for me, please? Raise your right hand and be sworn.
Do you solemnly state that the testimony you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Come on up, have a seat, please.
Yes, sir.
Good, please cheer up, sir. Can you tell us your name and spell your last name for the record?
Corey Hamilton, Hamilton.
Thank you. Your witness, counselor.
How are you currently employed?
I work for BNSF Railway.
How long have you worked for BNSF Railway?
I just hit 5 years in July.
In August of 2014, where were you assigned?
I was a rapid responder in Tehachapi, California.
Now, were you a permanent rapid responder or a relief rapid responder?
I was a permanent.
Do you recall when you started working as a rapid responder?
I went exempt into that role in September of 2013.
When did you first meet Robert Limon?
September or October of 2013.
Okay. And how did you come to meet Robert?
He was filling in for the position that I was taking over until I got trained up on the position.
Just in a given month, how regularly would you see Robert Limon?
It varied depending on vacation schedules and sick leave. He was our more regular relief, so more than John Justice, who was our other relief at the time.
How well did you get to know Robert?
Very well.
Did you ever socialize with him out of work?
Not outside of work. He would come over before for meals and stuff like that, and we socialized before and after work.
Where were you living at the time?
In Tehachapi.
So when he would come before or stay after, how much time would you spend with him?
An hour or so.
How would you characterize your friendship with him?
It was work at first, and then it became, if I had a question about anything, I knew I could talk to him.
Did you ever have any arguments with him?
Never.
August 17, 2014, were you originally scheduled to work that day?
Yes, sir.
Why did you not work that day?
I had family in from out of town, so I chose to take a sick day.
Who was originally supposed to cover your shift?
I called John Justice and asked him if he could work, because he actually worked for me on Saturday. So I asked if he could work for me on Sunday as well. He said that he had something planned, but he would get it covered between him or Rob, regardless.
Where were you when you were notified that Robert Limon had been killed?
At home.
Once you were notified, what did you do?
I went right to my office.
And when you say your office, what are you talking about?
The building where we had our shop at in Tehachapi.
Did you speak with law enforcement?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you attempt to provide them all information that you were aware of about Robert?
Absolutely.
Now, in the time you got to know Robert, did you also meet Sabrina Limon?
No, the first time I met her was at his funeral.
Prior to the funeral, had you ever spoken with her over the phone?
I know I spoke to her on the phone. I don't remember if it was before or after the funeral.
After the funeral, did you have contact with Miss Limon?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Describe the contact.
She called me, asking me if I had heard anything new in the case, if I had been asked to come back in for more questioning. I told her that I had not. I hadn't been contacted by the detectives at all. I found it extremely weird because the first time I met her was at his funeral, and
Due to the fact you found the conversation extremely weird, what did you do?
I called the detective right away. I found it weird that she called me when we had only met in person once. I knew that John Justice and Rob were extremely close. I knew that they hung out, they went golfing, stuff like that in the off time. So I found it extremely weird that she called me and not him, somebody that she'd only met once.
And when you say you called the detective, is that Detective Meyer, seated to
Yes,
my
sir.
right? Nothing further.
Mr. Terry Cross.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Hamilton.
Good morning.
Would it be safe to say that most of your socialization that you had with Rob was limited to the times he was in Tehachapi working?
Yes.
In other words, you were never going out to Hellendale or Silver Lakes?
No.
Okay. And so we're also clear, John Justice didn't work full-time in Tehachapi, you did, right?
Yes.
Okay. And with regards to Ms. Limon calling you to see if you had gotten any new information, you were certainly closer to the location where the homicide took place, right?
I was, but I was not somebody that knew her. The only time I had ever met her was at his funeral. So
I
it
understand
was.
that. My question is you were working still in Tehachapi, right?
Yes.
You were still working for the railroad, right?
Yes, sir.
And she was calling you to find out, because you were in Tehachapi, whether or not you had any new information she didn't know about, right?
Overruled. You can answer.
For something like that, I would have rather called somebody that I would have met and known personally.
But John Justice didn't work in Tehachapi. You did, right?
Yes, sir.
Assistant.
I'll rephrase. You worked full time in Tehachapi. John Justice worked there on occasion, correct?
Yes, sir.
And he was kind of a substitute responder when one of you was having a day off, right?
Yes, sir.
You worked in Tehachapi in the same location where her husband was killed, and she called you to ask you if you knew anything new, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further. Nothing else.
All right. Mr. Hamilton, you step down, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll bring Mr. Hearn back in. Record reflected, Mr. Hearn is back on the stand, still under oath, subject to direct by Mr. Smith. He's accompanied by his attorney, Mr. Campbell. Mr. Smith, if you'd like to continue.
Thank you. I'll take you back to December 2013. You previously testified that this was a time of emotional conflict. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
During this time, did you attempt to break off your relationship with Miss Limon?
I did discuss that with her, yes.
Okay. Fair enough, I can approach that. I had an item marked.
Yes.
People 66 through 70, mark next in order.
Start with people 66. If you could describe what that item is, please.
That would be photographs taken on my phone of a letter that was sent to Sabrina.
What is the time frame of that letter? When was it written?
December, if I remember correctly, December of 2013.
Okay. Moving on to people 67, if you could describe that item, please.
Those are two photographs of myself taken in the Limon's household.
Okay. What is the date that you took that photograph?
Both taken on December 27th, 2013.
Okay. People 68.
It appears to be some notes, some handwritten notes that I wrote.
Do you know the time frame that you wrote the notes in people 68?
I believe it was the day that, or immediately after, when Rob discovered us the second time, discovered our Gmail account. So that would have been probably February or March of 2014.
Okay. Moving on to people 69.
I don't recognize the form. Oh, this is extracted from the iPhone. It appears to be some notes that were.
Smith?
Do you recognize the writing contained on that report?
I can't say that I remember it directly.
Moving on to People 70. And do you recognize the writing in that report?
Yes, I do.
Okay, who made that writing?
I did.
Okay, what is the time frame that you made the writing, or when did you write it?
I believe somewhere early 2014.
Your Honor, we request People 66, 67, 68, and 70 be moved into evidence at this time.
Terry?
Also request get unpublished.
Granted.
Can you see the photograph from where you're seated, Mr. Hearn? This is page 1, People 66.
I can.
What is that a photograph of?
That was a photograph of me crying and holding that letter that I had just referenced that I had written December of 2013.
This photograph, who did you send it to?
I don't know if I sent it to anyone. I remember around that time and the writing of that letter being probably one of the more emotional things I'd felt in quite a while, and not being a very emotional person typically. I remember having taken that photograph, or perhaps a couple photographs, just to remember the emotion attached to that, since that was one of the few times I had cried around that time.
The letter that's in your hand, who did you provide that letter to?
To Sabrina. Thank you, sir.
Can I ask you questions about the first paragraph?
She sent it as that, Counsel?
Page 2, People 66, Your Honor.
66 has how many pages? I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. He's got it? More than one, correct?
Yes, Your
All right, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm going to read the opening sentence to you. I didn't know that love would feel this good. I feel bad for crying because I know we are doing the right thing. It just hurts so bad. It shouldn't have hurt this bad because we aren't breaking up with each other, only doing the right thing and showing the responsibility that will save your marriage. At this time frame, December 2013, did you attempt to break up with Miss Limon?
Yes, we did discuss a breakup.
Next sentence, it's crazy to think that we truly, really, truly could have caused your divorce within a few months. I love you so much, but I never want to hurt your family. You recall writing that?
I do.
Okay, what was the sentiment behind writing that? What was the purpose?
I believe I briefly referenced this yesterday, but this was a time where, upon some reflection of thinking of the relationship that I had ongoing with Sabrina, I had come to the conclusion that if it would be best for her and ultimately, beneficial to her, I would remove myself from her life. I would leave her alone. That obviously was something very, as you saw the first picture, it was conflicting and very emotional for me because for the past year, I had developed a very deep emotional relationship with her. So me writing this was sort of in confirmation, providing some confirmation both of my deep love for her, but also of something that I felt was necessary.
Moving on to page 1 of People 67. You testified you took this photograph the end of December 2013. Where are you at in this photograph?
In Sabrina's home.
Okay. So how did you progress from writing a letter where you didn't want to cause a divorce to being in Miss Limon's bedroom a few weeks later?
Exactly in the same way that prior attempts at separation had gone. Like I mentioned yesterday, early on in the relationship, there was that time when I had asked her if we could speak about the foolishness of progressing, and I remember at that time, as I shared yesterday, her raw emotion was something I was not wanting to cause. It really kind of broke my heart to see her upset, and was really desiring to accommodate her emotions, and around this time, as you mentioned, from early December 2013, willing to break up to obviously passionately rejoining. This was probably the most pivotal time in our relationship, as far as she did express that it would be in her best interest if actually I wasn't to leave her life. And so then during this time, it motivated a lot of those preliminary conversations on our future together, which then led to discussions of divorce and eventually to death, to the death of Robert. So that month was definitely probably the most pivotal turn in solidifying our relationship.
You talked about 2 times, and we've seen 2 items that you've written where you tried to break up with Miss Limon. April 2013, now December 2013. Both of those times, what drew you back?
Primarily, as I just said, trying to accommodate her emotions and her best interest that she indicated, You
said that you discussed divorce with Sabrina.
I did.
Okay, what was her response to those discussions?
That divorce was not something very appealing to her as an option for the foundation of our relationship together. She gave me a number of reasons, for a variety of different reasons, and these were things we discussed over numerous conversations. But to summarize, for her own sake, first of all, she expressed that the loyalty of her family and friends would most likely be with Rob. So if she was to initiate a divorce, most of her friends and family would side with Rob, and she would be seen as the bad guy, so to speak. So that was one of the main reoccurring reasons. But other reasons just included, I think, the lifestyle of sort of autonomy that she wouldn't really have to address ongoing issues with Rob. Also, she expressed issues with that it would be in the children's best interest as far as as far as the complications that arise out of having children raised in two different households with dual custody and all of those issues, that divorce wasn't so much a pleasing option. Even for, as ironic and sad as this sounds, for Rob's sake, she expressed that he would honestly rather be dead than divorced. And that losing her would essentially kill him, which was something she didn't want to cause, as far as the emotional expression, kill him. Those were, like I said, a summary of some of the things she expressed that leaned away from divorce. But then again, the context of those conversations was in us having a future together. So that dovetailed right into conversations on killing him.
What were Sabrina's visions for your future together?
We discussed marriage in the future. She was familiar with some of my lifestyle, and so obviously we'd talked extensively over the past couple years. So she was familiar with my work, my business, my sort of my personality and lifestyle, and some of the pursuits that I was going towards. And so she had a reasonable expectation that she would be then included in those things, as well as a house I was building, that she was able to kind of see the property, and so I think there was a definite expectation to be included in everything in the future of my life.
Did you discuss her children in this future?
We did.
What did Sabrina tell you?
Well, we discussed some of the changes that might occur as far as their upbringing. As I mentioned yesterday, she did have a couple complaints as far as Rob's involvement with them or his interest in them. And so in progressive conversation, we discussed some of the changes that might occur as far as just including them, and contrary to some of the issues that Rob had as far as not including them or not nurturing them, that we would see to it that those things would be accommodated.
Showing you now People 68. You said that you wrote this around February 2014, March 2014?
I believe so.
Second line says, gave his wife away to another man to share passion and experience that humans can share together. Why did you write that line?
As I've said before, that was one of the primary issues that Sabrina had expressed with Rob, was his flippancy with her sexually and emotionally, being in a being in a marriage with someone who was willing to give her away to others.
Next line down, gave his wife away to other women. Is that the same context?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And all of this information that you've written, where does that information come from?
From Sabrina.
At this point, had you ever met, besides the time at Beefle Brady's, had you ever talked to Robert Limon about what he did with his wife in their private relationship?
No.
Where it begins in pencil, it says, "Defied the living God, please kill him, God," with 3 exclamation marks. Why did you write that?
As I just expressed, this timeline was a very was a time where I think I inherited a lot of her frustrations against Rob. Up to this point, I had been having an extramarital affair with her, and she had a husband to worry about, but I didn't really, because I wasn't so emotionally invested in her. But at this time now, as we're now planning this future together, now her frustrations with Rob became my frustrations, her demons became my demons, and everything that even the fact that this checklist exists shows that I had a frank disgust for him that was developing and contributing to me being very dismissive of his life ultimately.
So these bullet points are a result of your conversations with Ms. Limon, both about her life and what should happen to Robert.
Exactly.
Down below it says, "I love you. My vision has not changed. Divorce or wait for Rob to leave. God's punishment." Why did you write that?
I don't recall.
When the decision was made to poison Rob, who decided on the location it should occur?
As I mentioned yesterday, she expressed that it would be more convenient, or I don't want to necessarily quote the word convenient, but essentially more convenient if he died in the hospital away from home, so that that wouldn't impact, that he wouldn't be suffering at home.
Were you aware of where Robert worked, the multiple locations at that time?
At that time, I knew of the expression that she would say he got overtime in Tehachapi, but I didn't really know as far as facilities or locations. I knew that he'd normally worked in Barstow and then got overtime in Tehachapi, but other than that, I didn't know anything about the location.
During the time frame leading up to the attempted poisoning, what was Sabrina's concerns, if any, with using poison to kill Rob?
Well, she asked me if the poison could be tracked, for one. The cell phone issue that I mentioned yesterday was the final concern that was pretty much the only reason we didn't go forward with it. But other than that, I think based on our discussion, she was convinced that it would probably be a fatal event that would go that would be relatively unsuspicious, because it would appear more of a medical event than a homicide.
Did she ever inquire as to how you knew that you would have sufficient poison for it to kill Rob?
She asked me if follow-up doses were going to be necessary, and I expressed that they wouldn't.
What, if anything, did Sabrina express to you about whether or not she trusted you to have this plan escape law enforcement detection?
Could you repeat that question?
Did you ever speak about being caught by law enforcement? You testified about the cell phones.
Yes, sir.
Did she ever express that she trusted you because of your intelligence or anything of that nature?
I don't know specifically. I know she did express that she trusted me and was trusting me with the things, with the aspects of this plot that she was not involved in.
Show you now People's Exhibit 70. Says date created, date modified. Created March 3rd, 2014, modified April 23rd, 2014. Do you recall writing these entries?
I do.
Okay. Moving down to, or I've just circled, it says buy Tupperware milk and med pestle. Why did you write that?
Those were some necessary items for the poisoning plot.
Next line says make, sample, batch, mix with water, neighbor dog. Why'd you write that?
As I explained the sequence yesterday, was pretty much verbatim. This was how I was going to be preparing to test the poison that I'd gotten.
At the bottom it says savings, ring, 5K, wedding, 10K, beach, question mark, and honeymoon, 10K. Why did you write that?
Just as a note or reminder to myself about some of the allotted savings regarding Sabrina that I needed to revise in my banking.
So would you characterize this as financial planning for your future with Sabrina?
Yes, that would be what that is.
I'll ask you about the date where you brought the poison over to Miss Limon's home. You testified that Rob worked 2 consecutive days in Tehachapi. When you took the poison over on the first day that he worked, is that correct?
I don't remember the exact configuration of his work schedule.
Do you remember what the time frame is?
April 2014.
Now, when you did provide the poison to Sabrina, what did she tell you about Robert's upcoming work schedule?
That he would be working the next day after I delivered the food.
What did Sabrina tell you she did with the Tupperware that contained poison?
She said she sent it with him in his lunch.
Did she tell you where he went that day to work?
Yes.
What
Tehachapi.
Tehachapi. And Tehachapi, as you've now learned, is in Kern County?
I did learn that sometime prior to that.
What did you ask Sabrina to call off the poisoning attempt?
Yes, we did discuss stopping that based on the cell phone concern.
Okay. And what did she say she told Robert?
In a subsequent phone call, she said that she had told him not to eat the pudding because the bananas had gone bad and it just didn't taste right, to throw it out.
Did she tell you what Rob did with that Tupperware?
I don't remember exactly right now.
Now, once you purchased a burner phone, how regularly did you use it to contact Miss Limon?
Frequently, with the same frequency that we'd been communicating before, just now through the means of a different phone line.
Prior to that, which phones had you contacted Miss Limon on?
Her cell phone and her home phone.
Okay. After you purchased the burner phone, did you still call her other cell phone, her home phone?
No.
And what was the reason for that?
As I said yesterday, so that we could put a buffer of 3 or 4 months in our communication on those phone lines, just in case the investigation became a criminal investigation. And if the investigator was to query her phone records and see a substantial amount of communication with someone else, that would obviously be something pretty suspicious. So it was essentially about avoiding detection.
Now, after you purchased this burner phone, did Miss Limon call you from her other phones to your cell phone?
There may have been a rare exception, but no.
When you purchased that phone, did you sign up using your name?
No.
Who paid for the phone?
I did.
Okay. How did you keep the phone charged, as in with cash to use it?
Through cash purchased loading cards. Apparently they have, you can purchase for cash at the store cards that then an identification number is used to then supply some finances to that account line.
When you purchased those cards, did you pay in cash or with a credit card?
Cash.
Now, how was the cash from the card loaded onto the phone?
I would give the identification number to Sabrina to resupply the phone.
So you did not personally take the phone from her and load it up. You sent her that information so she could do it.
That's correct.
You said after the burner phone was purchased, that's when some of the darker conversations you had with Sabrina about Robert.
Around that time, yes, sir.
What was said in these conversations by Sabrina?
Well, not to provide exact quotes, but essentially to summarize, in reiteration of all the things that had once been complaints or justifications for an affair were now not so much just simply justification for an affair, but sort of dogma behind killing him and reasons for killing him. So the complaints didn't change much because Rob's behavior didn't change much at all, but now those became things that were points of contention and frustration. So she expressed ongoing and increasing frustration with his absolute disregard for the interests of his family, the interests of his marriage, even with consideration that now he'd seen a couple times that he's at risk of losing his marriage. He was unwilling to address those topics and just preferred to sweep those things under the rug, maintain a certain image of this perfect household and cohesive family unit, and those things became complaints that she would share with me as far as that things obviously were not perfect and that he was not willing to address those things. So, I mean, there's a plethora of individual complaints, but those were the sentiments that she was sharing with me about him, and with increasing urgency and frequency. Once right before the poisoning plot, she did express increased urgency and had kind of asked me if it would be possible to hurry the plot along, and then we discussed timing again before the August issue, but that's later.
When you were having these dark conversations after the poison had been taken to her home, what did Sabrina say she wanted you to do?
What was the timeline on that again?
Okay. After April of 2014, you're having these conversations about Robert again, darker conversations. Mm-hmm. What did Sabrina tell you she wanted you to do?
With respect to Rob, to kill him.
You said that once the burner phone was purchased, you wanted to have a window, so there was no calls on her home phone and the other cell phone, correct?
That's correct.
Did you continue with any subsequent planning for a second attempt at Rob's life?
We did.
What steps did you take towards the second attempt?
I did a little reconsidering of the initial plot to poison him, and thought that the poisoning would probably not be actually the best plot to carry out a second time, just based on if I was made a suspect. I figured, with my medical background and training, poisoning might actually make me more of a suspect than something that was more out of character for me, like violence. So I guess as far as what I did, I reconsidered and thought that it might be better to just approach him directly for the killing.
Now, at this time at your job, what were your duties?
Well, I was a firefighter and a paramedic with the city of Redlands, California. So whether working on a fire engine or a truck or medic squad, obviously all the roles and responsibilities of a all-risk fire department, so firefighting, paramedicine, all that. But also within our small department, there is a lot of room for specialty or different special assignments. So I worked extensively with the Explorer program, the volunteer program. So I set up a lot of the training and taught the conferences, attended or taught at academies, stuff like that. Also, I was sort of heading up a policy manual revision, moving all of our policies over onto a Lexapol online format. So I had a lot of responsibilities there. Also with, shortly before I was arrested, I had completed my training for an arson investigator, for investigating arson fires. And then, like I mentioned, the specialty of being a paramedic as well, and all the training and ongoing CEs that are required for that. So just as far as work, had a pretty full load there.
What training did you receive to be an arson investigator in 2014?
In 2014, I believe I took 2 or 3 of the necessary classes. There's a battery of classes required for those certificates, and I took a couple in 2014.
What were you taught in these classes? Just general.
Identifying origin and cause of fires, and then the other half of it had to do with analyzing suspects and analyzing evidence.
Now, the classes that you took to be an arson investigator, did you learn, in essence, how a law enforcement investigation is done?
In essence.
Now, after you reflected on the poison attempt due to your medical background, you changed your approach. What other planning did you do for the second attempt?
Well, I plan to confront Rob directly in Tehachapi, just because of the removed location, and it's a distance away from where we lived in our area and in a different county. I did a little bit of the preliminary footwork and consulted Sabrina for some other aspects of questions I had as far as the facility or where he worked. But over a few months' time, I developed a couple ideas on how to go about killing him, essentially.
Okay. What were those couple of ideas?
As to whether this should be something from a distance or closer up, whether it should be at daytime or nighttime, streets leading to and away from the facility, etc.
Did you tell Sabrina that you planned on confronting Rob directly in Tehachapi, as you put it?
I did.
Did you tell her that you were either going to, assuming, shoot him from distance or close range?
I know that she knew that I was going to be confronting him at a closer range.
And when you say at a close range, did you tell Sabrina what you intended to do?
I don't recall the exact details of whether I expressed what kind of weapon I'd be using or not.
Did you express to Sabrina that you would be attacking Robert Limon with violence?
Well, I guess that's inferred that we were going to be encountering each other and he was going to be dead afterwards, so I guess that would be inferred.
Now, when you're planning or lead up to the second attempt, what information did Sabrina provide you?
Well, she described the facility for me because I didn't have knowledge of the layout or whatnot. So she expressed that it was a industrial building at the end of a long road, and its proximity to some houses nearby. Or no, correction, she didn't tell me that part. She just said it was an industrial facility at the end of a long road. And then she offered to find me pictures of the facility that she thought she had from before. later on, shortly before, she described the office layout and the interior. She verbally described the interior to give me a kind of an idea of what to expect inside. She gave me some other sort of heads up or advice on avoiding detection, as far as she told me that the responder vehicles at the location had recently installed forward-facing cameras on the utility trucks, and just obviously to avoid the front of the truck. Just, I guess, little incidental concerns, like she had expressed that it would be better that I take my motorcycle instead of my truck, because I drove a pretty loud diesel truck at that time, and my motorcycle was quieter. At that time, it was my intention and expressed to her that my thought was to go out at nighttime, and because he worked occasionally night shifts out there. So the idea of a quieter vehicle, just so as to not wake people up or have witnesses potentially. So we discussed the location, some of those other incidental concerns, but trying to think. I know as I needed specific logistical information, she was able to provide some of those things.
Did you actually go up to Tehachapi prior to August 17th, 2014 to look at the industrial complex?
Coming back from a trip, I happened to be driving through that area and made a point to stop in that area and see if I could identify something that was similar to the description of the facility that she had given me, even though it wasn't my intention to carry anything out at that time, because it was well within our window of time that we discussed. So I did drive through and identify the facility in the months prior to August.
If I may approach, have an item marked.
Yes.
People 71 right next to order.
Let me approach.
Yes.
Showing you people 71, if you could just review the photographs, please.
Yes, sir.
Who took those photographs?
I did.
What are they photographs of?
The industrial facility on Goodrick Road.
Your Honor, I would request people's
71.
71 be moved into evidence at this time.
Any objection? Forbidden.
If I may publish, Your Honor.
You may.
Starting with page 2, people's 71 labeled as image 0690. Is this a photograph of?
The industrial facility that Mr. Limon worked at.
Now, on the date that you went up to surveil this location, did you go into the complex?
I drove through the complex, yes.
When you drove through the complex, what did you see?
I was able to identify the BNSF building or lease simply because there was a garage door open and a marked vehicle with BNSF insignia on it, as well as Robert Limon's vehicle parked nearby.
When you went up on the day from where the photograph was taken, did you know Robert was working that day?
Yes,
Who told you?
Sabrina.
Did you tell her you were going to that area?
To try to find the building, yes.
Oh. When you told her that you were going to try and find the building and she told you Robert Limon was there, what else did she say?
I don't remember the exact conversation we had, but I remember knowing that, hey, he had a day shift and that she told me when he would be getting off work that day. So going there, I remember having the pre-knowledge that he would both be there and probably be getting off work by the time I was able to identify the building, because it took me quite a while to actually find the building.
Now, after you did find the building, did you speak with Sabrina Limon?
I did.
Just going to put up now photograph page 3. This is image 693. And again, what is this a photo of?
The area surrounding Goodrick Road, or that facility.
Now, after you took those photographs, you called Sabrina. What did you guys talk about?
We picked back up a conversation I'd had going previously as I'd been driving. I was driving back down south from being up north, so I'd been having a conversation with her and then broke to let her know that I was going to be trying to find the facility. And so then after finding it, it had been some time, but I expressed to her that I'd been able to find it and had seen it. And I believe I mentioned that Robert was there at the time, and that just I don't have clear recollection of our exact conversation, but I know we carried on with much of the conversations like we would have. Any of those lengthy conversations were pretty fragmented and full of various details. So
Moving into the summer of moving into the summer of 2014. Once the window that you had set forth had elapsed, what did Sabrina tell you about the timing she wanted, or she requested, leading up to the killing of Robert?
as we were approaching that time period where any time now, if he was to get a Tehachapi overtime, I guess he would be a candidate for our plot. Now we began discussing some of the timing, and one complication that came up was that her mother had an injury and was sent into palliative care at a nursing home nearby, and she had expressed that she'd rather wait until her mom was home and settled from, I think it was a broken leg injury. That was one of the main reasons we held off for a little bit longer till her mom could get back settled. And but then there was also some probably less significant but also considered timing issues as far as In the weeks following the August 17th, they were planning a river trip, I believe, and it was something that Sabrina was not interested in attending yet again, something they seem to do every year. And so she was willing to make the killing attempt prior to that, and was kind of pushing for that.
So Sabrina asked for a delay when her mother was ill, but following that, she asked for it to be expedited.
Yes.
And then that would be the killing of Robert.
Exactly.
Now, at this time frame, this would be August of 2014, did you and Sabrina still discuss a divorce between Sabrina and Robert?
I don't think we did very much at all. If we did, and in instances when we may have, after we had kind of concluded that divorce was not a good option, those instances were mostly characterized by just essentially reassuring ourselves that divorce was not a good option.
When did you learn that Robert was going to be working in Tehachapi prior to his death, or immediately prior to his death?
What was the last thing you said?
Let's start with this. Do you recall the date Robert was killed?
August 17th.
Okay. How long prior to that had you been made aware that he would be working on August 17th?
1 to 2 weeks, I believe.
Did she keep you up to date on his schedule?
Yes.
Okay. If Robert was working in Tehachapi, would she give you notice when she found out?
Almost always.
Now, were you working August 16th?
I was.
What shift did you work?
Considered B shift in a fire department where we work 24-hour schedules split into 3 shifts.
On August 17th, when did you get off work?
8 a.m.
And when you got off work, what did you do?
I drove back up to the area where I lived at the time, and on my way into town, stopped at Walmart to get some ammunition so that I could have some that was unlike the ammunition I already had at home. I got home and made some final preparations on a silencer that I was going to be using, and actually then left home and went back out to an area just south of where I live and tried out the silencer just to make sure it was in proper working order, and then came back home and began preparing to leave to go back up to Tehachapi.
Now, you left work at 8. Where did you leave from?
Redlands, California.
On your way back, were you talking to anyone on the phone?
I don't recall right now.
Okay. Did you talk to Sabrina that morning?
I know I spoke with her when I was at home and making preparations to go up to Tehachapi. I definitely have recollection of that.
Okay. You don't have recollection if you were speaking with her on the way home?
I do not.
Okay. What type of ammunition did you purchase at Walmart?
I don't recall the manufacturer, but I know it was like a full metal jacket kind of. I'm not familiar with all the names, but I believe it was a full metal jacket, bullet tip.
Why did you buy a different box of ammunition on August 17th? What was the reason for that?
Yeah, I had ammunition of my own and was not wanting to have ammunition that matched up exactly to the ammunition I had at home.
Which firearm did you plan on using?
A Glock that I had.
You said that you did final preparations on a silencer. What were those preparations?
I believe just attaching it to a threaded barrel that I had for my Glock and making final assembly. It was it required me to put on end caps onto it and then assemble it onto the firearm.
Okay. Where did you get the threaded barrel?
Online.
Okay. Why did you purchase the threaded barrel?
To be used with a silencer for a rob situation.
Describe how you made the silencer.
It's essentially using a large mag light where the end caps are replaced with drilled end caps to fit the caliber of bullet that'll be passing through it, and then 4 or 5 freeze plugs from an engine that also fit in the inside diameter of the mag light are then placed at increasingly, or rather decreasing distances so as to capture the sound as the bullet passes through. So by essentially assembling all that and gluing everything into place and assembling it for use.
You said you tested the silencer.
I did.
What were the results of that test? How did it go?
The firearm was extremely quiet, probably no louder than like a pneumatic nail gun you'd use for carpentry or something, even though it was a .45 caliber gun normally. The only change I noticed was that because of the weight of the silencer and some of my engineering of it, it turned the gun into a single shot, essentially. Even though it's a semi-automatic gun, it was unable to cycle, to lift the barrel and silencer to cycle the next round. So essentially it had to be manually, the next bullet had to be manually cycled.
You said you returned home and continued your preparations.
I did.
What were those preparations?
Well, I assembled some of the clothing that I would be wearing, a mask that I had gotten prior to that time that I would be using, 2 backpacks, extra ammunition. I don't remember everything I had in that bag, but also some of the clothing, disguised clothing that I'd be wearing, and then finally making preparations on my motorcycle, which included using some adhesive flashing to change the color of the tank, the exhaust pipes, and the rear fender.
Now, as you were making these preparations, did you speak with Sabrina Limon?
I did.
Did you tell her of some of your preparations?
I did.
Which of your preparations did you inform her of?
All of them. Well, I shouldn't say all of them. I didn't exactly explain everything I was doing, but she asked me how I was feeling. She asked me if I could be detected, and so I explained the clothing and the mask, that I didn't think I would be recognized. She asked me about my motorcycle, if that would be noticeable, because it did have custom lettering on it, and I explained that I was taking measures to disguise the motorcycle as well. I don't remember the intricate details. I remember that as I was working, I was speaking to her on a hands-free mode, so my mind was with some of my work, probably more as opposed to paying full attention to our conversation. But I do remember having a lengthy conversation with her that morning.
Okay. Did she express any other concerns, whether it be for whether or not you'd be detected, your safety, anything of that nature?
She did. One thing she mentioned in that conversation was just to be careful, because she knew that, or she told me that Robert would likely put up a fight and could fight. She also expressed that she thought I was kind of getting a late start because I was still at home, and based on the time it takes to get from where I lived all the way up to Tehachapi, I ran the risk of Robert's oncoming relief maybe arriving around that time. So she expressed that she thought I was kind of getting a late start, and so just be careful.
You said that she expressed concern for your safety.
Absolutely.
Did she express that same concern for Robert's safety during that conversation?
Not with respect to his life, no.
Why did you buy the mask?
To avoid detection in the event that there were cameras nearby that I hadn't noticed before.
Why did you buy the additional clothing from a thrift store?
For the same reason.
How about the adhesive flashing to your motorcycle?
Likewise.
All to avoid detection?
Yes.
What did you and Sabrina talk about in the context of avoiding detection once an investigation was started?
Well, we first and foremost, we're hoping to not need to use any alibi, and hopefully it would be investigated as a robbery, we discussed. But in the event that investigation was pointed at her, I encouraged her not to mention our affair at all, just because that would obviously open a room for scrutiny. But in the event that they did discover me and her and that we had had an ongoing affair, our agreed upon alibi was that any indicia of like us being sneaky about anything was more so to hide the fact that we'd been having an affair, as opposed to anything more than that. So essentially, the plan was not to mention me at all, but in the event that I did come up, that it could be simply excused as trying to hide an ongoing affair.
One of your steps to attempt to avoid detection was to make it look like a robbery.
Yes.
Okay. Who came up with that idea?
Well, Sabrina told me about the Tehachapi Loop area as it pertains to the railroad, something I wasn't familiar with. Apparently, it's an area where trains have to slow down quite a bit to pass through a grade. As such, she shared some of the stories that Rob had expressed to her as far as there being a number of train robbers around that area, and that sometimes they'd had encounters that were dangerous in nature around Tehachapi, and that Tehachapi was already sort of a hot spot for robberies like that. So the idea was that if it could be posed as a robbery gone wrong and appear to be that someone was in search of maybe train logs, shipping manifests, things like that, so that it could be known, or so that sort of it would throw off the investigation, so that they'd be looking into those who are pursuing, breaking into those sea crates and doing robbery. So this was something we discussed. She shared quite a bit of her past knowledge about the Tehachapi area.
August 17th, 2014, after you left, which direction did you go? What highway?
On Highway 58, I headed east.
Do you recall approximately how long it took you?
I didn't have my watch or cell phone with me, and I would say whatever the speed limit of going home along that route. So I'm not sure. I couldn't give an approximation right now.
Okay. Now, when you arrived in Tehachapi, what did you do?
Right. Mr. Smith, I apologize. You stop it there. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a recess. I have to have the attorneys in another courtroom for a little bit, okay? So let's take 20 minutes. 20 minutes. See everybody back in 20 minutes.
Six is in session.
I will go back on the record in People versus Limon. She's present in court with her attorney and the people are represented. You have Mr. Hearn on the stand, subject to direct by Mr. Smith. All 12 plus 4 in the box. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Mr. Smith, if you'd like to continue.
Thank you. Prior to the break, you said that you did not take your cell phone with you to Tehachapi on August 17th.
I did not take my cell phone with me.
Why not?
Just because of the GPS tracking that would show that I was in Tehachapi at that time.
You rode your motorcycle to Tehachapi?
I did.
Okay. How far can you make it on a single tank of gas in the motorcycle?
I found out it was a lot less than I had thought. It has been a couple of years, so I don't remember the exact mileage, but it was not extremely economical, so I did have to refuel a couple times.
Okay. Did you have to refuel on the way to Tehachapi?
I wasn't forced to, but I did just just to make sure I was topped off. I got fuel on my way to Tehachapi, yes.
Okay. Where at?
It was a gas station on the southeast corner of the Four Corners intersection of 395 and 58.
Okay. Now, after you topped off your gas tank at 395 and 58, where did you go?
West on 58 out to Tehachapi.
As you're driving west on 58 towards Tehachapi, what's going through your mind?
Well, at that time, on August 17th, it was my initial thought or intention to use this trip out there as a sort of a recon again, just because of the amount of time that had passed from the last time I was through that area. I couldn't remember clearly where the facility was or which particular industrial building he worked in. So I was going to be using that primarily as a time to recon and refamiliarize myself with that area, and almost, I guess you could say, as a dry run for a later date. Sabrina had provided me the 17th as a day that Rob was going to be working during the day, but then had also said that I believe it was the 19th or 20th he was going to be working at night. So that was obviously more favorable conditions to actually carry out the act. So as I was driving out there, I was just kind of thinking through, trying to recall the complex, some of my what I would do to avoid detection as I went out there, and also with the possibility of encountering Rob if our paths crossed. So kind of
You drove out there and you thought of the possibility you might encounter Rob. At that point, if you had encountered him, what were you going to do?
I think that's what I was thinking about. I was definitely armed to kill him. However, I wasn't sure of if I'd do that or not yet, just because it was sort of my first time out there.
As you approached Tehachapi, same thoughts going through your mind?
Yes.
As you enter onto Goodrick Road, at that point, what are you thinking about?
Well, as I turned onto Goodrick Road, I was looking down towards the end of the road where the facility is located, and happened to see a responder vehicle leaving the complex coming my way. So, assuming that was Rob headed in my direction, I turned around and parked at the nearest cross street, and just parked there to get a better perspective and see, without being noticeable, see if that was Rob, if he was actually leaving the complex, and it was.
Where did you go after Rob passed?
I proceeded back down the road, back down Goodrick Road, and parked across the street from the complex, sort of in a secluded area where my bike wouldn't be seen, and then took off on foot to see if I could locate the building itself that Rob was in. It's a cluster of, industrial buildings right there, so I was trying to figure out which garage he actually worked in, and so I kind of walked around the outside perimeter of the building, of the complex.
Now, when you had gone there May 23rd, 2014, did you scout out cameras?
I did notice that there was a pretty obvious forward-facing camera on the front of the complex.
Based on seeing that camera, is that why you scouted or skirted the perimeter?
Yes, that is.
Describe the area where you parked your motorcycle.
It would be in a turnabout behind a large pile of asphalt.
And when you got off your bike, what items did you have with you?
A backpack with those items that I can't remember all of it right now. I know there was another backpack. I think there was another backpack within that backpack, and then a firearm, and
What clothes were you wearing? As in, if someone was to look at you at that point, what were you wearing?
a long sleeve shirt and loose pants, neither of which were ones that I'd ever been seen in before.
Where did you purchase those items?
The thrift store.
Now, after you skirted the perimeter, where did you stop?
There is like I said, a cluster of industrial buildings. So I parked, or rather, I stopped in front of some buildings that I thought to be across from where Rob worked. So I don't remember right now whether they were drums or barrels or scrap metal, but there seemed to be a lot of debris around that area, and was able to kind of position myself to look out from that point.
How long did you stay at that location?
Probably, I'd guess 15 minutes, somewhere around there. I was not able to determine, based on the front of the buildings, which was the BNSF building. So I did walk across the center median and check some of the doors and windows of those buildings immediately across from where I was looking. There were two different buildings. I couldn't remember which one was BNSF.
At some point, as you were waiting, did you observe Robert Limon, either in a truck or out of a truck?
Not while I was waiting, no.
Well, how did you find out where you needed to go to, or where the shop was at that point?
Considering the fact that no one was nearby and it was a weekend, and so I wasn't able to really determine where the building was, I decided I'd go ahead and call it off and started to walk back towards my motorcycle. At that time, as I was heading north back up outside perimeter of the facility, Robert drove back in and opened the garage door and pulled into the BNSF at least there.
Okay. So once you observed Robert opening the garage door, at that point you recall which building it was.
It became obvious.
Okay. From that moment on, what were you thinking?
Some pretty conflicted thoughts, but ultimately leading to the thought of not really wanting to go through all this again, as I was considering coming back at a later date at night, and just the simplicity of maybe confronting him right then. So at that time, I walked across the center median again, this time closer to the front of the facility, and began walking back down towards where I had seen Robert park and where the garage door was still open.
You said you had conflicting thoughts. What were those thoughts?
Well, there was just the apprehension of what I was considering doing. Unfortunately, at that time, I think I had addressed most of my guilt and explained it away or excused it away as this was sort of an inevitable act that just needed to be carried out, and as unappealing as it was for me, it was something I was eager to get over with. So there was kind of the back and forth of obviously there's some apprehension in the thought of senselessly taking someone's life.
You walked over towards the BNSF shop. Did you immediately enter?
I did not. There was an unexpected vehicle parked in front of there, in front of the shop. And I say unexpected because I was not expecting anyone else to be there at that time, which gave me the thought that there might be someone else visiting or with Rob at that time. So I think I passed sort of at a distance slightly in front of the shop to see if I could see anyone inside of it, and then kind of wavering went back and forth. I think just kind of trying to look within the shop and confirm that there was only one person. I was unable to see anyone at that time, so assuming that there might be one or possibly Rob or someone else there as well, that added to some of the duress and conflict of what I was about to do. And at that time, I paused and entered a breezeway just immediately north of the industrial building where Rob works, and I sat there for a little while and sort of recollected myself.
Okay. How long did you wait in this breezeway area?
Probably another 10 to 15 minutes.
You said you recollected yourself. What was your thought process? What were you mentally going through?
It hasn't been extremely explored up to this point in the case, but somewhere along the lines of summer of 2014, there'd been sort of an ongoing narrative of Sabrina and I and seeking purpose in our lives. And so at that time, as I stopped in that breezeway, I specifically remember praying and sort of seeking that purpose that I had set out to find, and was the foundation work behind that purpose was that essentially, I guess, as I was implying before, it was inevitable that Rob needed to die for Sabrina and I to move forward with our relationship. So I remember sort of praying about the conflict that arose out of that purpose. And I know this is the product of extremely twisted thinking, so there's no way to really pathologize or explain any sort of logic behind this, and I apologize for that. But essentially, it felt like I was approaching something that inevitably had to be done.
Okay. You brought up the term that you and Sabrina used for seeking purpose.
Yeah.
What did you and Sabrina mean by that?
Objection, cause for speculation. Oh. In regards to my plan.
Sustain.
When you discussed seeking purpose with Sabrina, what did she talk about?
Summer of 2014, during this time, as I was becoming very dismissive of Robert's life, and we were developing all these justifications for killing him. I don't remember exactly how that phrase "seeking purpose" had come up, but it was something. It was a tagline that essentially we gave to ultimately seeing this relationship through and living the lifestyle that we wanted and were in pursuit of.
As you expressed it, was seeking purpose a tagline for killing Robert so you guys could be together?
That was a pivotal facet of the purpose, but it wasn't the direct jargon attached to that. The purpose itself encompassed, I think, an intangible that was just a product of our restlessness in the current situation that we were in.
After you were done praying in the breezeway, what did you do?
Turned the corner and entered the shop where Rob works.
Okay.
At that time, Robert came out from the office. He had been in the office area, which is in the back corner of the garage. And we briefly spoke. I don't have distinct recollection right now.
What distance were you from Rob when you spoke?
Within 10 feet.
You said that you had a mask with you. Were you wearing the mask at that time?
I was.
What did the mask look like?
Just an older man appearance.
Where were you at when you spoke with Rob?
In the entrance, near the entrance of where the garage door was.
Okay. Where did you proceed from there?
Down the north side of the truck that was parked there in a little walkway. He went to retrieve some things, and as was my intention, I went to pull out a firearm. However, the gun kind of was, or the silencer was kind of stuck in the corner of the backpack that I had. So ultimately sort of followed him with one hand in this bag trying to retrieve a gun, and at some point he turned around, which was around the time when I fired the first shot from within the bag.
I'm showing you what's already been marked and moved into evidence, Peoples 53. You recognize this firearm?
Yes.
Is this the firearm you used?
At this distance, it appears to be.
At what angle did you fire the first shot?
It was a very steep upward directed shot, just because the trajectory was affected by the fact that the end of the gun was still stuck in the corner of the bag that I was holding. So essentially the firearm was down low and the barrel was facing upward, and so yeah, upward trajectory.
After you fired the first shot, what happened to Robert?
He fell, seemingly mortally wounded.
After he fell, what did you do?
So as to avoid the front of the truck that was parked right there because of the cameras, I went around the back of the vehicle and then headed up into the office to follow through with the previously discussed plan of sort of overturning the interior of the office and making it look like a robbery.
The truck had forward-facing cameras. That was information Sabrina provided you?
That was. I didn't independently check if there was or not, but that's what I had heard.
When you were in the office, what did you do?
Opened a number of cabinets and or drawers, office sort of filing cabinets, and just grabbed some paperwork out of a number of cabinets, hoping that some of them would be of some significance. Also, there was a computer, a laptop computer on the desk, and all these things I put in the backpack that I had.
After you had these items in your backpack, where did you go?
I headed for the entrance again, so as to exit. But previously, when I had shot Rob and he fell, he had exhaled in a way that made me believe he was dead. But I questioned that as I was about to leave, thinking I really didn't want to leave him if he wasn't entirely dead. So I went back around the backside of the truck and quickly fired one more shot at him, and then closed the garage door behind me and ran from the facility.
Where did you fire that second shot? To what part of Robert's body?
With the gun pointed towards his head and upward from the direction of his feet.
And when you walked around that second time and Robert was laying there, did you have any indication that he was still alive?
Other than that questionable gasp before that I had heard with the prior shot, no.
During this time in the office, were you wearing any gloves?
I was.
What type of gloves?
I don't know exactly how to describe them, but they were sort of a rubberized face with a knitted back, sort of a utility glove.
So the time that you were in the BNSF office, you were wearing gloves, full-length pants, long-sleeve shirt, and a mask.
That's correct.
Any part of your body visible if someone was to be looking at you in a way that they could recognize you?
No.
After you ran from the shop, where did you go?
I got back on my motorcycle and put on the second backpack that I had, and got back on the highway 58, heading back east.
Show you People's Exhibit 6. This would be. It's already been testified to. As a photograph taken of a motorcycle at 1748 going westbound on Goodrick Drive. Page 6, people 6. Recognize the motorcycle in that photograph?
I do.
Whose motorcycle is that?
The motorcycle that I rode and had disguised that day.
You can see the tailpipe, kind of a chrome color. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
from the adhesive flashing you described?
It is.
What color are your pipes normally at this time?
Black.
And you said you also applied some adhesive flashing to the tank?
Yes.
And what part did you cover of the tank?
Hardly visible in this picture, but the entire tank was a black tank with custom lettering on the side. So it's hard to see in this picture, but the whole tank was made silver by disguise.
So 1748, as you're going westbound on Goodrick Drive, you've just killed Robert Limon. Is that correct?
I'm not sure as to the timing of the sequence, but
driving away, what are you thinking?
That I would like to quickly get out of this current disguise, just in case anyone had seen me. I didn't have any reason to believe that there were witnesses or whatnot, but wanted to get back dressed into some ordinary clothes and get home.
Were you feeling happiness, elation, excitement?
Immediately leaving, probably fear, regret. Later on, that produced more just a feeling, and I'm sorry this sounds bad, but of relief that what had been in the works for so long was finally done.
You said you got back on Highway 58.
Yes.
Okay. You also stated that you wanted to get your clothes off.
Yes.
Where did you do that at?
I don't know the name of the street, but on the first off-ramp that I had come to in sort of a rural area where there was no development nearby, I pulled over into a pretty unremarkable location and replaced my license plate, took the flashing off my tank and fender and exhaust pipe, and got changed into some other clothes, with the exception of my shoes and helmet.
The clothes that you had worn at the time of the murder, what did you do with them?
Put them in the backpack that I had with me.
The adhesive flashing, what did you do with that?
Likewise in the backpack.
You stated you replaced the license plate?
I had driven out there with no plates.
After you made these changes, let me take a step back. Why did you make those changes?
In the event that there had been a witness or someone seen me fleeing the scene, now no longer would the description match my appearance, because no longer would I be on a silver motorcycle with silver pipes, but a black one with black pipes, and I'd be wearing a much different clothing.
Where did you go eastbound on 58?
Well, as I was heading eastbound on 58 was when I came to realize that the fuel economy of my motorcycle was not all I thought it was, and had to switch over to my backup tank, realizing that I was going to be running out of gas at any point. So I pulled off, I believe it's the city of Boron, or if that's a city, small area called Boron, and drove through there looking for gas to refuel. And I didn't see any down their main, so I drove down their main drag, whatever that is, and then got back on Highway 58, eventually running on fumes pretty much till I got back to the Pilot gas station on the southwest corner of Four Corners.
Figuring if I can approach, have an item marked.
Equals 72 mark next to Marty.
Your Honor, I would request to authenticate on the screen People's 72 is surveillance footage from Pilot gas station.
Chair, have you seen that?
I haven't received it
Any
yet.
objection?
No.
Proceed, counsel.
$72. Showing you people 72, what's labeled as gas pumps 1 through 4. Do you recognize this is the Pilot gas station you stopped at August 17, 2014?
Not specifically, but it appears to be.
Do you recognize the motorcycle entering to the gas pumps on?
I do.
Okay. Who's on the motorcycle?
I am.
What are you wearing?
Shorts and sleeveless t-shirt.
Your Honor, I would request people 72 be admitted. It contains footage from Pilot.
Chair, any objection? To be admitted.
Why did you enter into the store?
To pay for fuel with cash.
Do you recognize the individual walking to the cooler?
I do.
Who is that?
Me.
Couple questions. What did you purchase?
Fuel, water, and Gatorade.
Why did you look down as you were walking towards the camera? You need me to
I don't recall.
go back. Do you recall doing that?
Yes.
Do you recall seeing a camera?
No.
How long did you remain at the Pilot gas station?
Just long enough to drink the water and Gatorade. I wasn't feeling so good, and throw the bottles away there and proceed on my way.
Now describe the trip home from Pilot gas station to your residence.
It was coming to be twilight, dusk. Sun was going down, and it's a pretty long, straight road down the 395. Honestly, other than the gathering dark, the only other remarkable thing that stands out about the trip was that I almost ran into a full-sized mattress that was strewn in the road. So I was slightly delayed by that. Turned around and parked nearby and pulled the mattress out of the road and then kept heading home. Other than that, the trip itself was not very remarkable to me.
When you got home, what did you do?
Well, among the first things I remember is retrieving my phone, which had been left there at home, and I saw that I had a lot of missed calls and from Sabrina, and so I called her.
What did you tell her?
Well, the conversation went something to the effect of that she was worried. She expressed that she was glad to hear from me. She was worried she hadn't heard from either of us and had been trying to call both of us and referring to both me and Robert. And was very worried because it had been a lot later than she'd anticipated that I was getting home. She wanted to make sure I was okay, and I did express that I don't remember the exact words that I used, but that I had done it and that everything was about to change. All the preliminary discussions that we had had about anticipating all the pressure that was about to be applied as far as to her life. And so I seem to remember making a couple encouraging or attempts at encouraging remarks just to be strong kind of thing, and expressed that I needed to get rid of a couple things that I had accrued while doing the posed robbery. And from the sounds of it, she was surprised that I had not already gotten rid of those things, but encouraged me to dispose of those. So it was a short conversation, but I had some things I needed to get rid of, and so we spoke just then briefly.
What did you do with the items you needed to dispose of?
Couple, like the laptop was probably the most incriminating or most obviously belonging in that office. So I destroyed it and drove it in my truck over to the backside of a nearby store industrial building and just threw it in a dumpster that looked like it was going to be relieved of its waste pretty soon. And then the clothes and some of the other items that I had with me, right now I don't distinctly remember, but some of those things I just stowed away in out of the way for right then.
What was your state of mind at the time as you're trying to dispose of these items in different locations?
In retrospect, probably pretty paranoid, probably frantic. And just, burdened by the fact that I just committed a really egregious act. So I wouldn't even begin to try to characterize it.
Now, you had training to be an arson investigator, correct?
I did, the basic requirements.
You had basic training in how an investigation proceeds, correct?
I did.
Did you, based on that training, have knowledge that anyone having an affair with a woman that ends up dead would be the primary suspect?
I strongly suspected that.
Based on what you had just done, knowing that you would immediately become the primary suspect, did you trust Sabrina to speak appropriately with law enforcement?
I did.
Okay, why?
Frankly, this was the culmination of something we had essentially planned together, and so perhaps my weakness, my trust was pretty strong in her.
Did you discuss at length with her the need for that trust between you and her post-murder?
You know, there was 3 months after the time that I killed him to the time when I was arrested, and during that time there was progressive tightening of the stress that we were both going through. So I know there were some remarks made, back and forth about our need for trust, but I don't know if we'd consider it in depth. I know it was a part of the ongoing narrative.
Now, in the days following the murder, where did you go?
I believe it was sometime in the week following. There was a trip that I had already been agreed to go on down to San Diego, unrelated to the murder.
Do you recall how long that trip was?
A few days.
Who went with you on that trip?
Some of my family members.
So it was a family outing?
Yes.
Now, when you returned, how long after, when you came back from San Diego, was it until you had physical contact with Sabrina before you saw her in person?
I don't recall.
Okay. Now, what was your plan for how you would roll out your relationships with Sabrina post-murder?
As she and I had began to discuss before his murder, we sort of had ideas about slowly, in time, introducing our families to one another, and simply I could be a friend from work, which is where I had met her, and so it was our intention to, over time, slowly introduce to one another, and the more naturally that we spent time together, it would seem like a organically flourishing relationship.
Did you ever attempt to make a public display of your grief or hearing of the passing of Robert Limon?
Necessary to that plan to sort of matriculate our families and get to leading people on. I did obviously need a way to have my family and friends know that I knew about her husband's passing. So I did, one time when my sister was with me, my sister Emily was with me, we went to Costco, where one of Sabrina's immediate supervisors mentioned Rob's passing, and I did react to it emotionally.
Was your reaction, your emotional reaction genuine?
The emotion was genuine. The reason for the whole staged performance was obviously a ruse.
And again, you were aware that you would become the primary suspect if you were found out by law enforcement at this time.
Yes.
Now, based on that, who were you concerned about speaking with law enforcement besides Sabrina?
She and I had agreed that Jason and Kelly Bernatine, who we saw in the photo earlier yesterday, they essentially posed the only real substantial risk to our discovery by law enforcement, just because they were the only ones that we knew of who knew that we had had somewhat of an affair over a year ago, back in 2013. So it was our intention to sort of gradually distance ourselves from them.
Do you recall calling Jason Bernatine or texting Jason Bernatine about 2 weeks after the murder?
I do remember contacting him. Yeah, sometime around then.
Okay, what was the reason for contacting him?
I don't remember the exact reasoning. I believe it was to build up to a dismissal in his mind of if he was to see me around Sabrina again, that it would make it more palatable for him.
If I may approach. Please. Showing you what's already been marked as People's Exhibit 9. Do you recognize the letter?
I do.
Who wrote that letter?
I did.
Who did you write it to?
Jason and Kelly Bernatine.
Why did you write the letter?
Well, could I review it to refresh my memory?
Yes, with the court's permission.
I think to sort of reintroduce me as a factor in Sabrina's life, but also to apologize for some of what I knew I had abused of their friendship in the past.
Did Sabrina tell you she was concerned about you being seen by either Jason or Kelly Bernatine?
Yes, we discussed that.
You're going to come and approach that item, Mark.
Yes.
People 73, Mark, next in order.
what's been marked as People 73, if you could review the messages contained within.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall receiving those text messages?
Yes.
Who did you receive those text messages from?
Sabrina.
Do you recall receiving those text messages from Sabrina in the month of September 2014? Okay. Did you review the entire packet of text messaging from in People 73?
I did.
Are all of those text messages you received from Sabrina Limon?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would request People 73 be moved in at this time.
Any objection, Mr. Chair? I tell you what, can you look at it over the left? Take our recess there at 1:30, please. Remember not to form or express any opinion or discuss the case. We'll see you all back at 1:30.